Good afternoon, everyone. I was just looking at the program before, and at least on the program, the title of my talk is Practical Advice on Typical Problems and Mistakes Made by Foreign Companies When Entering the Chinese Market. I guess this sounds quite negative in the sense that, oh no, there's more problems that we can encounter when we enter the Chinese market. It's not just, barriers, but it's also culture, and negotiating is all very difficult. Actually, what we've just heard is that things are difficult and things are easy as well. But what I wanted to talk about today was also, avoiding, while being aware of some of those problems, also avoiding some of those problems. At least be aware of them. I should also say something about where I'm coming from talking to you today. I work for an organization called China-Britain Business Council. In the UK, it's been around for some 50 years, and it means that the trade promotion infrastructure in the UK is relatively developed. That means we've been trying to help the UK companies for quite some time to enter the Chinese market. And we listen to what they tell us, so we can convey what they're telling us to other people. In recent times, there's been some surveys that we've done for small and medium-sized enterprises operating in China. And the message is coming back is that SMEs are operating successfully in China, foreign ones. The drivers for them going there and the reason why they're operating successfully are in some of the earlier talks that Professor Zhao and Dr. Yang gave. The fact that China is growing so fast, that the domestic market is really strong, that people favor particular brands, that they distrust some local brands, and also that they're very safety conscious. And also they've got lots of problems in China at the moment, which have arisen out of very fast economic growth. For example, pollution, so they're looking for environmental solutions. For example, an aging population, so they're looking for solutions to help people look after the elderly, healthcare related solutions, housing, various designs of particular buildings to accommodate an aging population, etc. So this means that there is a genuine demand in China for the things that we're offering. And my personal view is that this accelerates the learning, accelerates the eagerness of the Chinese side to do business quickly. If they see that there's an opportunity in the domestic market for something that you have, maybe some technical solution, maybe some particular service, they want to capitalize on the domestic market just like you do, and they're keen to do business. And this can sometimes accelerate a negotiating process, so it's not frustratingly slow, it can be fantastically quick as well. So the surveys that the UK SMEs are telling us, what are the problems that they're facing? Well, there's things like regulatory barriers, lack of market information, language and culture problems, problems with human resource management, recruitment, retention, those types of things, as well as intellectual property. So I'll be touching on some of those in this talk. Also, I should make a comment that if the companies here are relative latecomers to China, that's a double-edged thing, really. I mean, the thing is that there's lots of case studies about how companies are operating successfully in China. So there's a lot to learn from those. There's really a lot of case studies out there about how to do good business in China. Also, in comparison to 20 years ago, it is a bit more transparent. I mean, there are more commercial laws. And there is slightly, in some cases, less bureaucracy. But equally, there's a lot more competition, which we've heard about earlier. So in some ways, the way is a bit clearer, I would say, but competition is something that I'll come back to. So, my starting point on this is that the future is bright for smaller and medium-sized companies going to China. You just have to ensure that you have the right fit to the market, that your product, that your solution, that your technology is something that has a genuine demand in China. And if it does, you know, things will flow that way. So slightly tweaking the title from, you know, just what are the problems, mistakes, I've kind of slightly re-engineered it by calling it avoiding problems and mistakes. So that's my starting point today. The future is bright. Just go over there and do some business. Okay. I suppose, you know, you can put together a slide about problems and mistakes and regrets and things like this, and one slide's not enough. In fact, I only wanted to use one slide, so I can't include everything. But lack of research, entering the market for fundamentally the wrong reasons, choosing the wrong location in China, it's such a big country, choosing the wrong business structure, the wrong kind of entity to operate in China, choosing the wrong partner. You know, you might just have a partnership with the first people you meet. I mean, that not a good recipe for marriage, so why would it be in you know, business in China? Conveying the wrong message, not carrying out due diligence, extra research on a partner, not registering intellectual property, ignoring cultural differences. And then during the last couple of talks, I wrote some more down. But, you know, not following the regulations. Chinese regulations are very strict. If you try and do shortcuts, then there could be problems later on, because your shortcuts might be picked up and they won't be forgotten. Not seeking legal advice and legal input on contracts and agreement, just leaving it to one side to do it. You could become unstuck. Legal advice is never cheap, that's true, but it's money well spent to ensure that you're protected. And also maybe relying too much on one individual for all your contacts in China. We heard before the importance of using Chinese people as a bridge to understand the business environment. That's true. But if you subcontract out your entire company's knowledge to one person, just one little bridge, and then they leave, then you're stuck. The successful examples of companies that I've met have really tried to embrace China, not just through one link in the company, but have tried to make it across departments. The senior management have gone over and really tried to absorb the situation in China. There's been a senior management commitment, as opposed to saying, well, let's hire this person here. They're Chinese and they just graduated from the local university. They could do with a job. How long will they stay? And if they do go, you know, what are the implications? So there's all kinds of problems, mistakes, and regrets. I'd just like to point out, though, a few sources of information that are available out there nowadays, and say that there's not really an excuse for not preparing well for the Chinese market, or at least there's less of an excuse nowadays. This excellent website, the EU SME Center, gives all kinds of advice, which is free to download, about doing business in China. It has fact sheets on exporting to China, export procedures. It has fact sheets on setting up in China, fact sheets on managing human resources in China. And it also does regular webinars that you can dial in from just about anywhere to do things. So there's resources out there that can be used. Likewise, the China-Britain Business Council website. Again, this is free for anyone to download. But just looking down this, we've done some work on green building programs, eco-cities. Particularly, we've drilled down on some areas in China which are new developing areas, not like the normal places, just Beijing and Shanghai, but all kinds of other places. There's also guides on there that cover things like culture and cover market drivers, you know, particular challenges and things. So what I would say is, you know, do download these types of things and do read them and do get prepared well. It's all too easy to think, well, you know, to go to China, you've got to go there. That's absolutely true. But China isn't the type of place that you can cold call. You need introductions via intermediaries if possible. You need to be well prepared. It's not like you can go and just knock on doors and expect to get somebody to come to see you. At least generally not so. The EU even has an association of Chinese business associations from across the region. So once an association is maybe set up here, it can join this, and it's a kind of bigger network of people, bigger network of help, a bigger network of shared experiences about doing business with, which is, you know, it is a sort of difficult, regarded as a difficult market. But as I said before, lots of people are doing it now, lots of case studies, lots of transparency on what works and what doesn't work. Okay, entering the market for the wrong reason. Could there be a wrong reason to enter China? Well, it's quite natural for people to think that China is a large market for me, because they just look at population figures. What is it, 1.4 billion? And then every which Chinese city, you know, has got a population above, say, 10 million. Places like Shanghai, 24 million. The sound of it is that it's a very sort of big market, a big market for anything. Maybe it's a big market, but there are lots of kind of caveats on market segments, the spending power of people, their particular preferences. You need to adapt particular products for the market, particular tastes. And so it brings me back to a comment that I made before. You know, do you understand the business environment when it comes to policy, about what's being encouraged, about what are the drivers? So, as I said before, if it's about something related to aging population, because that's a problem, environment, that's a problem, buying food, particular types of food, you know, this is an issue in China. Is it related to safety? Is it related to brands? There's got to be a rational reason for you going to China, and then the market can be big. This kind of comes back to my, perhaps the bottom point on this slide first, about competition. China is a very, very competitive market, simply because Chinese companies are hugely capable and innovative. And if they see something that's working in the market, they'll do something similar. They might copy it, but they might do something similar. And they're likely to do something similar for cheaper, right? So there's domestic competition, and there's also foreign competition in there. So it's about trying to make your product a bit different. Occasionally, some things are welcomed because they're imported, because they're from overseas, safety critical stuff, health-related articles, pharmaceuticals, and that type of thing. It gives the Chinese consumer a sense of security that this is something that's going to work. It's not going to fall foul to cheats in the domestic market or anything like this. So China is a large market, it is, but you have to look, I think, quite sort of scientifically, quite rigorously about whether what you have is going to fit the market. China has low-cost labor. I suppose this highlights the point that, you know, 10, 15 years ago, shop floor of the world, people were pouring in to have cheaper products made in China. We learned before that 60% of the foreign invested enterprises account for about 60% of China's exports. A lot of those early enterprises are now serving the domestic market. And if you want to find a really cheap place to produce things, then because of rising salaries, because of a rise in the cost of employing people through legislation, then you've got to think about, you know, if it's just about cheap labor, you know, maybe China isn't the place for you. This is why some people are looking, even Chinese companies, are looking to other places across Asia. Although, interestingly, when you talk to people who are manufacturing in China, and you raise the question, where is the next China? And quite often the comment will come back, well, actually, it's China. Because what companies are doing is that they might be experiencing the higher costs of salaries and labor in the coastal areas, and they're going inland into China. And so long as you can do that, then without, you know, the shipping costs wherever to your market getting too high, then China could still stack up. Also, people observe that China has really many, many years of excellent manufacturing experience now. They've got the education, the vocational education around is getting better, a good infrastructure, good quality control, whereas some other countries around the area, you know, are maybe where China was 20 years ago. They have cheap labor, but that's all they have. So entering China for the right reasons, it needs to be thought through. And it's down to a company's strategy, what it's trying to achieve. Is it looking at the domestic market? Is it looking at global markets? And it needs to consider this competitive issue. Choosing the wrong location. So, I might not go through this blow by blow, this slide, but because it's the same as, I guess, any sort of strategic decision on location. You know, proximity to market, ports, raw materials, development zones, coastal versus inland. I mean, that's a big issue, coastal versus inland. Comparing the costs in kind of manufacturing in Shanghai with the cost of manufacturing, say, in Chengdu, is a big thing. Efficient infrastructure, access to cheap labor and educated labor being university graduates who may have come from departments of particularly strong universities. How welcome and flexible is local government support? When China-Britain Business Council takes delegations to China anymore, it rarely comes into contact with Shanghai government officials. It doesn't need to. It's too open. You know, just get on with things. When you go to a second or third or fourth tier city, you're much more likely to receive government officials, or they will host you because they're looking to develop a relationship. They want to attract you to an area. They might be willing to give you some special encouragement or preferential policies. So getting the location needs some serious looking at. And the number of companies that you come across who have met a Chinese graduate is from some city, and in the end, they've gone to that city to set up because of that person. I asked them, you know, would you do that anywhere else in the world, apart from this market that you don't think you know anything about, you know, and you end up in this particular city, which isn't always right. We did some research on so-called regional cities. Often in China, they're called second or third tier cities and that kind of thing. And this report is on our website for people to look at. But what it tried to look at is the kind of fastest growing Chinese cities outside the usual suspects of Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen and Guangzhou. So a lot of the names on this map you might not be familiar with. But actually some of them are very well known for specific things. And that's an interesting characteristic of China. Through historical or policy reasons, you might find a city that you know, has a very high strength in, say, optoelectronics, like Wuhan or Changchun. I mean, like in Xi'an or Chengdu, there might be aerospace industries. Historical, because it was from a previous age where they wanted to have these strategic industries in locations so far from the coast that it would be impossible for them to come under attack. But nevertheless, these are strong areas here. And a couple of slides, for example, point out that in advanced engineering, you've got places like Xi'an and Chengdu. If it's automotive, it's places like Changchun. Even actually Hangzhou in the surrounding area of Shanghai is strong on components. But there's information on which strengths these particular cities have, and that's useful in deciding a location, deciding where to go to. And that's for advanced engineering. We could do the same for ICT, information and communication technologies. It's not surprising that some of these clusters on this are in places where they've had these so-called special economic zones. They attracted the earliest waves of foreign direct investment into these places. And a lot of these are down in the south of China, in Guangdong province. And a lot of them are also ones that you've probably heard of, like Suzhou and that kind of thing, but some that you won't have heard about. Sometimes Chinese cities have entire industries based around one product. Cigarette lighters, for example, is something that I read. A whole town dedicated to making cigarette lighters and making them very cheaply because they can pull together to get the various types of supply chain, you know, together. Choosing the wrong structure. Well, what's available to us? I'd say that the big change over the past 20 years or something is that over time, because China's joined WTO, 2001, lots of reform and opening up, it means that for the most part, companies' decision about what type of entity to set up and why can be strategy-led rather than regulation-led. And that's a big change. Let's just go through some of these points here. Of course you can export, but China's a market where you need some visibility. You need somebody on the ground going for the business. So agents and distributors are what you need to look for. The best place to find them may be at exhibitions. Go to a key exhibition in China and tout for agents and distributors. What we'd advise is that having touted for them, you start to think about how you can do some due diligence on them to learn a bit more about them, and that's possible too. The lowest form of a company's footprint in China is called a representative office. And that's basically a kind of just a department, if you will, of your company here, but in China. It's not a full-service business entity. It can't do commercial transactions. It can't issue invoices. It can't receive monies. But it can represent. It can do business development. It can liaise with suppliers and customers. It's not as encouraged as it used to be. And in fact, that's reflected in the fact that it's more expensive to run them nowadays. Every year you have to renew a business license. It gets scrutinized by the tax authorities. What the Chinese government is hoping is that more companies will set up full-service businesses rather than just rep offices. But nevertheless, if you're sourcing, for example, or if you're in a particular sector, representative offices might be the way to go. When we look at investment, the best way to split investment is in terms of ownership and activity. Ownership is what we've been talking a bit about in some of the earlier slides, joint ventures, wholly foreign-owned enterprises. Joint ventures were the earliest form of investment into China, and they were encouraged because the Chinese were really keen to get capital, technology, and know-how. In the early days, some of them went spectacularly wrong, and they fell out of favor. Some people found that the contribution from the Chinese side was just in the first couple of years. After they'd opened doors, they weren't very useful anymore. Equally, there was financial control of IP issues. So actually, since the mid-1970s, the mid-1990s, since 1997, wholly foreign-owned enterprise has been the favored route of foreign direct investment into China. Most companies do a wholly foreign-owned enterprise. They overcome the route into markets by just simply identifying and recruiting and employing an experienced Chinese general manager who may have a background in the industry and can help them go in. The other way to split up investment is simply in terms of activity. What does it do? Manufacturing, trading, consultancy. All these things have to be specified in a business license when you make the application to set something up in China. So there's more things at your disposal now, more options, particularly on ownership. On trading too. It was only in 2004, before then, you couldn't have a trading company. You couldn't have a foreign invested trading company. What do I mean by a trading company? It's one that has the rights to import and export into China, to buy products overseas, to sell them in China, to buy products in China, export them overseas, to buy products in China and sell it to other Chinese customers. That's possible now. So a trading company, which is wholly foreign-owned enterprise or a joint venture, is now permitted. I've put a holding company down here because it's not something that people automatically think. Let's say you set up a wholly foreign-owned enterprise. Who's going to be the holding company? The automatic thing to think of is that the company here will own the entity in China. All I would say is that there are options. You could set up a company in Hong Kong that could be the owner of the entity in China. And if you ever had to sell it, it's a lot easier selling the holding company in Hong Kong than it is changing the ownership in China. Minimum registered capital. Setting up an entity in China is setting up a wholly foreign-owned enterprise may take 4 months, 5 months, 6 months or more. There's also what they call minimum registered capital requirements. It's an amount of money you have to put up to demonstrate that you can run the business that you're describing in your business plan. It can be used as working capital as well. It's not tied up, it's not locked up forever, but it's something to think about. The other thing to talk about, which will be covered more tomorrow, is whether your sector is encouraged, restricted, prohibited or permitted. China has a foreign investment guidance catalogue which says which products in China are up for kind of more scrutiny, need particular business licenses. Obviously, if you're in the encouraged category, it's more easy to set up, and you just may be beating your head against the door if it's prohibited or restricted. Very difficult. Not every Chinese city now will take all kinds of investment. Go to a place like Dongguan. If you're into manufacturing, if there's any hint, Dongguan's in the south of China, if there's any hint of pollution, environmental problem, they say go somewhere else. I'm not interested. Sometimes companies have to hunt around to find a city that will welcome them because they have a particular quirk in their manufacturing manufacturing process. I've put employment down that law down there as a kind of prompt. It's also about doing things wrong. Chinese employee contract law is quite strict now. You have to have the right employment contracts in place. You have to have so-called employee handbooks. If you don't get it right, you could be in big trouble if you want to lay people off. So there's things that can go wrong, but it's just about knowing the things that you need to do to avoid these issues. Choosing the wrong partner. I was discussing with Professor Zhao over the break about his slide said that joint ventures are favored in China. Well, they are from the Chinese side because of this technology transfer and this type of thing. And I did say before that there was a period where joint ventures really fell out of favor. But it's true that the candidates to be a joint venture partner in China are different now. It's not just state-owned enterprise. It's not just somebody recognized, referred to by a ministry or a bureau or something like that. It can be a very dynamic private company that has, you know, a good kind of history that essentially has its eye on the same sort of commercial goals that you have. So there's a general view on the ground in China that people are kind of, well, looking afresh at what joint ventures could bring. So it's not for me to say don't do a joint venture. Although a lot of legal advice in China would say don't touch joint ventures. But, you know, under the right circumstances, with the right partner that can help you get into the market, distribution channels, helping with various bits and pieces, licenses and things, it can work. So it's worth considering. So choosing the right partner, again, not teaming up necessarily with the first person you come in contact with. They may seem the best partner, but do the rounds, go around, meet other people first. It'll give you a better chance to negotiate a good deal for yourself. So there are some examples where Chinese entrepreneurs, they might be involved in one sector and they want to do a joint venture in another sector with you. It's important to look critically at those kind of things. What sort of track record have they got? Where are the benefits they're going to bring? So these points down here just encourage people to ask specific questions about the technical expertise and the capabilities of the Chinese partner. Conveying the wrong message. Well, it's more about trying to find a way to convey the right message, isn't it? There are all kinds of ways when, as I said before, about understanding the market, understanding the business opportunity, where, for example, you can understand a particular government policy. China's famous for its 5-year plans. It also has a variety of other plans relating to particular sectors. If you're able to frame your offer in the language that the Chinese government is encouraging, convey it in a way that is you know, it's going to help China to achieve the goals that it sets out in these plans, you really have a much better chance of the penny dropping, so to speak, with the Chinese side. So this is this third point here, communicating product benefits within the context of relevant government policies. But there's all sorts of other ways you can convey messages. And, you know, you've got to do that by giving a lot of thought to For example, the name that you're choosing for your Chinese company. Is it conveying the right message? Are you using the right Chinese characters to do that? Can you select particular Chinese characters to convey very, very positive values? So there's that side of things as well. Communicating as well the right message through the right people at a senior level in the company. Keeping that person consistent as well and not swapping and changing with all kinds of people with the China project. And this last point, you may have to adapt your business model or your product or service to suit the Chinese market, to suit their requirements. And these last points here. Due diligence. How do you conduct due diligence in China? Well, there's two ways, really. In the UK, we have something called Companies House. I don't know if you have anything here, but it holds the kind of company registration details of any which company when it registers for its business license. In China, there's something called the Administration for Industry and Commerce. And for a small amount of money, you can get them to print out who the shareholders are of the company, what its business scope is, you know, how long it's been in existence. And this is the most basic due diligence that you can carry out on a company. There are also legal firms that can do more advanced work, more advanced investigative work, from forensic accounting down to individual person due diligence. Might be following them around in a car or something. But there's stuff that you can do to ensure that the person that's talking to you are what they say they are and what they say they represent. I've lost count of the number of times when people are buying something from China and they say, I met somebody who said they were the manufacturer, but they weren't. They took me to a factory and they had free access and said it was their factory, but it wasn't. It's possible to get around this doing some due diligence. Registering intellectual property. This is a big issue in China. Foreign firms worried about their intellectual property. What can you do? You can register it. Generally, you know, the Chinese took a lot of trouble to study the sort of German and British systems. They have a system in place where you can register your intellectual property. Enforcement can be difficult in some areas, but if you've registered it, you have a much better chance. The other thing is that it's kind of like a part of a... In China, they have what's called a first-to-file system. So if somebody spotted your brand name or trademark and thought there might be a chance in the market, chances are somebody in China may have registered it already, and you know nothing about it. Chances are they could manufacture something similar to yours and sell it on the back of your name. So you've got to be very wary about that and build in intellectual property into your strategy for entering a market like China. It's really important. And it doesn't cost that much to register. You know, you should register also maybe the Chinese name that you select. You should ring-fence your intellectual property in your commercial agreements as well, in your employee contracts. And finally, paying attention to cultural differences, which is what we're here about next. So this is another great website, China IPR SME helpdesk. This has got fact sheets about all you need to know about registering a brand in China, some of the considerations when selecting a Chinese name, and also, you know, sort of newsletters that you can sign up for and things like this. So again, this comes back to the point that there's stuff out there that you should be able to look at. So that's a quick canter through some things that could go wrong, and maybe thinking about ways in which you can just do a bit of work to kind of cover them off. I'm pretty sure I've forgotten some, and I'm pretty sure that some of you may suggest some that I didn't think of. But hopefully this is a kind of practical side of doing business, and my closing remark is simply that, you know, Get involved in it. If you've got a particular product and service that there's a niche for, investigate the market, and you'll find the Chinese eager to cooperate. I think that's the main point. Thank you.
You mentioned that a lot of origin companies, when entering Chinese market, first they open a company in Hong Kong, and then that company opens another company in China. Besides the tax reasons, why is that? Are there any other reasons why the companies enter the Chinese market that way?
Okay, so this question was about some of the reasons why somebody was structured via Hong Kong. I would say that a lot of the time it is just that, a structuring reason. It's not necessarily, unless you're looking at other Asia-Pacific markets, there's no need to have a kind of huge, fully fledged office there, because people will complain, well, you're telling me just to have 2 companies instead of 1. What's the point in doing that? But there are a couple of reasons. In the UK, at least, the tax it's not a tax advantage anymore because of some double tax treaties. So that, but it is for some, because I think withholding tax from China to Hong Kong, that's tax on profit, can be lower than going directly from China to the home country. So that could be an issue for some. There is the point about medium-term strategies where if you, I think you've just said, but in summary, if you want to sell the entity in China, it's easy to sell a parent that it's in Hong Kong. There is another reason as well. Some people talk about the idea of a kind of firewall, if you will, for liability. That's to say, if you were producing something, I don't know, hazardous, or where industrial accidents could happen. It seems like a selfish reason, but you could have something in Hong Kong, which is one more buffer to the trouble coming back to the foreign country. In terms of other things, you know, there are cases that can be made where the intellectual property is kind of held somehow in Hong Kong while doing the business in China. But I have to say that stepping stone argument aside, most companies, they might use Hong Kong as a kind of structuring reason, but they're not setting up two fully fledged presences. They're just looking ahead. And most companies just go to China. And you don't have to have a holding company in Hong Kong. It can be British Virgin Islands. I mean, the principle's the same. But Hong Kong, Taiwan could be good stepping stones for other reasons as well. But yeah, horses for courses, that's what I say. Depends.
Yeah. Mr. Blackburne, I have a question, or two. Well, Croatia is a small country and the economy is not that good. And when we were talking about mid-sized companies in Croatia, probably there are small-sized companies in Great Britain. So can you give us any suggestions on what kind of products or services could be mostly easy to enter the Chinese market? What would you suggest? Are we talking about food products? Are we talking about some kind of services? What kind of services would be manufacturing? I think it's too expensive for most of the Croatian companies. And can you give us maybe some examples of small and mid-sized companies from Great Britain who enter the Chinese market? We are not talking about, I don't know, McDonald's or some car dealership or something, but something smaller that really managed to enter the Chinese market, and maybe give an example how they did it and what was the good strategy in entering the Chinese market in this way.
Well, I come from a city, Leeds, in the UK, and there was an example where a company there made electric motors that are used in mines, in the mining industry. And anybody who knows anything about the mining industry in China knows that it's quite a perilous activity. There's a bad safety record. And the particular motors, electric motors manufactured by this company, were kind of sort of fireproof and didn't make sparks and stuff like this. And so despite being a lot more expensive than the domestic alternatives, they made a good market. And very quickly, 45% of their production, I think, was being sent to China, and then more. And actually, a recent thing, the company that owned them, which was in a Dutch company, was bought by a Chinese company. It's actually quite common to see that the acquisition habits of the Chinese firms are related to exactly what's going to really fly in China. So anyway, that's just an example of a product, a niche product fulfilling a particular or satisfying a particular concern in China. Another small company, a recent case, a company that makes crystal glass. Very expensive, just like we learned before, that it ticked the expense exclusive box. Got a deal with a Chinese kind of chain of shops, luxury shops across China, and the order was going to be equivalent to its entire previous year's exports to around the world. That's a kind of on the luxury side. We have a couple of clients at the moment. They do things related to maybe special instruments, measuring instruments. One does special processes and technology related to treating wastewater. So they're small companies, but a kind of variety of sectors. But quite specialist, and I should say, kind of world class in their own way, because what I have noticed is that in China, that they're very knowledgeable about their problems and the state of the industry, the state of the art of the industry that kind of they need to solve those problems. Just mentioned before about awareness about food. Equally, we heard that maybe not everybody wants to spend more of it, but equally, you look at the behavior of, certainly in the UK, people buying powdered milk products, filling their suitcases, going back home, selling it on Taobao or something like this. There is market there for kind of various types of foodstuffs that bring the Chinese consumer the sense of security that they're looking for, especially when it comes to locks into kind of family values and, keeping the family safe and healthy and that type of thing. So those world-beating products or solutions or technologies, I think, have a chance. And traditionally, China has kind of, perhaps unsophisticated, but it's about the past, isn't it? To the extent that they judge a company by its size. That's because previously all Chinese companies were huge. 40,000, 100,000 employees. But now I think they're judging a company by two things. First of all, its technology, and secondly, who else it's selling to. They're very eager to find who else has got your equipment. And they're eager to try new technologies, test them first. And then if it works out on a kind of trial basis, then, you could have a chance.
If I may, I have just additional question. What would you suggest to small size and mid-size creation companies how to start trying to find some kind of a distributor for their goods, for their products, how to find that good partner in China? We don't have a specialized agency or commerce for doing business with China, so.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that the UK is a bit spoiled because it has that kind of infrastructure. I mean, we're able to get teams on the ground to do some digging, to do some research work, to come up with short lists of appropriate distributors. If you didn't have that, I would say that good Chinese companies are coming over and they're having a presence at European exhibitions, whether it be medical ones or, this type of thing. Sometimes they're exhibiting, sometimes they're visiting. So you can meet maybe qualified Chinese partners, due diligence, aside. You can meet them outside of China. Alternatively, every year, there are huge keynote Chinese exhibitions, but also world exhibitions that are using China, every now and again. So a world exhibition in something or other will have, this year we're in China, this year we're in Shanghai. And I'd encourage you to get out there, spend some time at the exhibition, employ an interpreter that can act as a kind of informal guide as well, invest in that, and then go around, speak to the people on the stands, get a sense of what's going on. And this is one way. I mean, it's an investment, that's true. You've got to go out there if you don't have people on the ground to do the research. But that's what you should do. You should get up in locations where these people are likely to be.
Thank you. I have a brief question about intellectual property. How foreign company can actually really protect the intellectual property, how to prevent copycats just copying the patent or whatever else, and how to stay ahead of in the game.
Okay. So that was a question about intellectual property. How can you really protect intellectual property? Well, the first step to really protecting it is just registering it. You know, you can register via for Chinese agencies, or you can get a European sort of patent attorney and trademark attorney or whatever with links in China to help you register. That's the first step. And then, let's face it, there are problems in China on intellectual and enforcing intellectual property, maybe because of local economic interests, maybe because it's just difficult to stamp out. But this concept about ring-fencing IP, I quite like. You know, everything that you do in your policies has an IP slant on it. So agreements with employees, commercial agreements include IP clauses, and then there's kind of non-compete clauses, people leaving the company. I met a company in the aerospace sector in Xiamen recently that had a very draconian, strict rule on the withdrawing of technical manuals. You had to check in, check out like a library. No photographs inside the factory. All kinds of things like this, because they'd registered their intellectual property, but they knew it wasn't quite enough. So having a strategy in place that ring fences the IP is important. But there are some sectors where, you know, this is a problem in the consumer goods sector. But in the industrial sector, it can be a problem. But the Chinese customer is keen to buy the right thing. That's you know, they know what's going on. So it's not an easy one to answer. But on the IPR helpdesk website, there's lots of sort of case studies and things at least to try and follow now. But I recognize it's an issue. But it's better. If you talk to any lawyer on the ground in China now, they will say, it's better than it was. So it's getting better. And also, just the final point, is that it's Chinese companies now who are registering intellectual property most eagerly in China. Now, they're more than foreigners. And that's because the tide has turned and they recognize the importance of IP ownership. So it's a kind of society and business environment that's recognizing the issue much more seriously now.
Anybody else? If not, thank you once again. Thank you very much.